All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Secular Jihadists for a Muslim Enlightenment. My name is Ali Rizvi, and with me is Armin Navabi. Armin, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I just answered that
Okay, I
already.
know. Yeah. So anyway,
See, I'm trying
so
to answer that a little bit more.
you've been
You
doing
ruined it.
better.
Yeah, I'm trying to do better, but now you ruined it because now I already answered you. I already answered you with
That's
so
what I
much
do. I ruin everything.
enthusiasm. I answered that
Yeah.
with so much enthusiasm, and it meant nothing because you had to ask me again. Anyways, go.
Okay,
I
so
just want to say,
I'm gonna.
guys, that I've been hearing these awkward starts on your podcast for a while, and this is the first time I see it live. So I'm so glad to to
Surreal,
attend
isn't it?
this.
Surreal.
It's
And the
amazing how
voice you're hearing.
after
Yeah,
all
yeah.
these
So
years, you still, you still can't have an unawkward start.
that's our trademark. That's our trademark. So the voice that you're hearing right now is of our guest for today, and this is my good friend Wissam Charafeddine. Wissam is a former Imam who came from Lebanon, and now he lives in Dearborn, which is the city with the largest population of Muslims in the United States. He's very active there in the community. He's a co-founder of a group called Muslimish, which you may remember from our previous guests, Nurain Babi and Ibrahim Abdullah. It's a growing organization where questioning Muslims and ex-Muslims can come together for open dialogue as part of a common community. So Muslim is actually holding its semi-annual conference in Detroit on October 26th, so just next month, where I'll be speaking as well. And the topic of the conference is can Islam and science coexist? So they're going to be talking about the compatibility with Islam with science. And today, what we're going to do, though, is we really want to get into, because I've known Wissam for a long time. I've spoken at almost all of their events, and it's you guys know that I really like the organization, but I really want to get into Wissam's story. I want to find out how he got into this work, what his experiences as an imam when he was back in Lebanon. So, Wissam, if you're cool with that, can you start?
Before
Go ahead,
you start, can I just say, first of all, I really love the brand, the name Muslimish. It's the perfect name for both ex-Muslims and questioning Muslims, right? And I also really, really appreciate that the fact that the branding is ex-Muslims and questioning Muslims, not reforming Muslims, right? Questioning Muslims. That's exactly what we need to push for. So I just, so fantastic. Yeah, I love, but Muslimish is fantastic. Like Muslimish, like Muslim-ish. It's such a great name. I don't know who came up with that, but kudos to whoever came up with that name.
So I got on that with some actually, because we talk over here about what does the word Muslim mean, and Armin says that a Muslim is someone who believes in Islam, believes in Allah, the Quran, and that the Quran is a perfect word of God. And then I say that no, it doesn't necessarily have to mean the Quran. It can just mean Allah and Muhammad and so on. But Muslimish is a really good term that actually encompasses the identity part of it. So it's that's another thing. So I also have to say kudos to that. Yeah. But so congratulations on the group, congratulations on the event. But let's talk about you. So what is your story? How did you go from being Wissam to Imam to the sort of secular work that you do now?
Right. So first of all, I want to give a second of appreciation for you guys for what you do, and it is not a very popular work in most of the world. So when a person does work that is necessary for enlightenment and it's not popular, that is a definition of what becomes later in history as heroes. So I want to show my appreciation to what you do. When we started in this work, there were very few voices of questioning Islam or reform or ex-Muslims that were very loud in the world. And now the movement has changed drastically thanks to people like you. So I was born in the United Arab Emirates, and my family was a liberal family, and but the history of my family is a religious family. It's a big family within the Shia community. It goes back in lineage to a large group of scholars descending from Imam Hussein, who is the grandson of the Prophet and a big saint figure in Shia Islam. And so I kind of stumbled upon religion for many different reasons. I look back retrospectively trying to find out why did I become religious at such a young age. But I think there are many factors. You grew up, both of you, you had experience growing up in Islamic countries. So you know that you are taught in school basically Islam. You're indoctrinated with Islam. And the age that we grew up in, there were not much entertainment otherwise. TV channels, cartoons, hero figures. I feel that I grew up, me and my friends, having the hero figures as the hero figures of Sirah, of the Islamic history. These were our Superman and Spider-Man. Are these Sahaba? Are these battles? So I think that grew in us. Although my family was liberal, I was inclined towards religion from a very, very young age. All the schools I attended, Islamic studies are part of any school over there. But specifically, I happened to go to private schools which were Islamic institutes at a young age because they had better discipline. My father put me in them, and that kind of also gave me more knowledge, more association with religious figures, religious scholars, the best in the Islamic world. As you know, in the Gulf countries can afford the best teachers, so they contract the best scholars from Jordan and Egypt and Syria and Iraq, and you have these big scholars, most of which have a background like in the Islamic Brotherhood secretly or wherever, but they're very big scholars. Very well educated in Islam, and they were our teachers, they were our imams, they were our sheikhs, our Quran teachers, etc. And growing up, learning the Sunni school of thought, I then went into an Islamic institute that was accredited by Al-Azhar University, and I didn't know it was so extensive, but it was very, very extensive, and you get a diploma from Al-Azhar from there. And then after the first Gulf War, we moved back to Lebanon. My family originally is from Lebanon. And
did you get a diploma from Al-Azhar in that sense when you went to that school?
Right. This is accredited by Al-Azhar. It's a very old school, which is Waqf. It's an endowment before even United Arab Emirates was formed.
Right. For people that don't know, Al-Azhar University is the main center of Islamic teaching for Sunni Islam all over the world, right? For Shia Islam, that would be probably the Hawza Ilmiya in Qom, Iran.
Qom in Iran, yeah.
And for Sunni Islam, it would be Al-Azhar University in Egypt.
Yeah, so when I went to Lebanon, I kind of got in touch with my Shia background, and I started studying Hawza studies in Lebanon. We didn't last in Lebanon very long. We came to Canada as refugees, and in Canada, I've associated with local scholars, studied with them briefly, continued my studies and Islamic activity. I became active Islamically when I moved to Canada. So it wasn't the intention. I felt that, the image that we had of the West, of America, was, based on the movies. And I remember a show that used to be called Charles and Charles. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it was about a foreign student who went to a school in California. And that was the image for me.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I remember vaguely.
Yeah. That was the image I was expecting. I was expecting to go into the school and I'm going to be friends with, some blonde girl, the Arabic obsession. So I really didn't know what to expect. But when we got to Canada, we went to, so we're refugees, so we're living in an urban area. We went to a school which had a lot of diversity, and there were a movement of like anti-immigration. There were a wave of what was called at that time skinheads, if you're familiar with them. It's like a white supremacist kind of a group. And
Majid Nawaz has a lot of history with them too. He was attacked by them
and
frequently when he was growing up.
They originated in UK. So anyway, we had like a hostile environment instead of a positive environment for assimilation. We didn't really experience very positive environment. That, I think, made me and other friends resort back to Islam as an identity to strengthen ourselves and to unite together. So I feel that made me more religious and actually made a lot of my friends the same way. So I actually became more religious when we moved to Canada, and I had the Islamic knowledge. And as I started learning English, we right away, started the Islamic Fellowship of high school students, and we were active. Like we had 5 meetings a week in the high school. So we had a meeting every lunchtime. So our goal was not to let any Muslim go to the lunch place because it's full of haram things, like music and girls and etc. So we were.
By the way, this is just one of many other examples to support what I often say is that the best way to fight Islam is to befriend Muslims, and the best way to promote Islam is to victimize Muslims. But this is just one of the many other examples. But go on, sorry.
That's true. I agree with you. So from there on, then we emigrated to the United States, and we received, finally our citizenship through my mother's family, who has been in Michigan for decades. And I continued. I was, by that time, an Islamic activist, both in the Sunni community and the Shia community. I was also active with the Tablighi Jama'at, which is it's a groups that propagate Islam through very traditional means, originated from India, etc., and different groups. And I continued my study with Iran, with Qom, the Hawza and Qom, through distance study. There was one Hawza that had Arabic distance study, and we studied with them for years. At the same time, I was active in the community. I studied with some local scholars.
What is Hawza?
Hawza is a Shia Islamic school, but it's traditional, so it doesn't have an academic system. It has its own traditional system.
Hawza Ilmiya Qom, the Persian version of it. Wait, so you basically studied in both the Center of Sunni Islamic Studies and the Center of Shia. I think you're one of the only ones in the world that has studied in both. That's amazing. Wow.
It was more common before. I think that contributed to my open-mindedness.
Okay.
Because I can see the delusion in both. Each one thinks that the other is. So I already had both of them. I suffered from that, and I felt that I think now retrospectively that helped me a lot, because the Shia, they always thought that, you know what, this guy might be Sunni and he's trying to make us Sunni, and and the Shia and the Sunnis always thought that this guy is Shia, he might be trying to make us Shia. So I was kind of, isolated from both, or maybe distrusted a little bit sometimes from both communities. They distrusted my Islamic unity intentions. They thought that too mixed to be Shia or Sunnah alone. But that actually led me to into reform Islam, into through studying, and you see all the corruption in the Islamic institution, all the selectiveness, and etc. It's an ocean of contradictions. As a Muslim, I thought we should go back to the basics. We should go back to the uniting factors. We should try to avoid controversial, weak hadith, etc. Traditions that are not authentic, not dwell on them. And that led us to actually create a movement for reform Islam. We were fought, death threats, etc. From that time, about 2004, 2005. And we created the Islamic Institute for Religious Studies, Humanities and Dialogue, kind of a reform Islam movement, which I was the chairman of. But what happened finally, to make a long story short, I'm sorry, it took a long time explaining this.
No, this is actually fascinating, and you're telling it really well. So, and it's a podcast, so please take your time. We can chill that way.
No, I hope it actually lasts longer.
Yeah, go for it. Keep going.
So so basically, in 2008, what happened is we received a question in Irshad. That was the acronym for that Islamic modern movement, which was basically, we were ostracized from the community at that time as a reform movement, as a movement that saw that there's no such thing as Sunni and Shia, and they're all just general resources of knowledge, and a Muslim should be larger than that, that not all of the Quran is necessarily active today. Some of it should be inactive. These were blasphemous thoughts for Muslims.
Yes.
So in 2008, 2008, the research, I think 2007, 2008, the research about the fossil that was nicknamed Lucy, the research about it came out public. I know it was discovered very early on in the 70s, but it took that much time for the research to be finalized.
So for those who are not familiar with this, can you just explain Lucy?
So I probably wouldn't be the right person to explain it, but as far
just
as
briefly.
Yes, so it's basically a group of fossils that were found in Ethiopia, in Africa, that were a very old ape fossils that dated back to about 6.5 million years. They were kind of complete. They give a complete picture of the ape at that time, which considered one of our ancestors, a common ancestor. It was a big scientific discovery, another one that lines up with the theory of evolution, of course. And we received a question about it in Irshad, and naturally I would forward the question to the Office of Jurisprudence, but they had no answer really for that question. It was purely scientific, and the question was, how do you explain this Islamically? So
just for the audience, the Lucy is Australopithecus. It was
Ali, your beard is keep touch the microphone and it makes a scratching noise every time it touches it.
It's Sunnah.
Okay.
All right, okay, I'll move it away. It's so Australopithecus is one of our ancestors. Anyway, go on.
No, but and also another thing is that I remember a lot of people came up with some conspiracy theories for why it was named Lucy, because Lucy is a female version of Lucifer. So.
Really?
Yeah. So. Okay. So people thought like this must be like some satanic or Illuminati conspiracy behind this, having this. So, all right. Yeah. So before we got disconnected, I was just saying that I remember when it was happening, a lot of people, not a lot of people, but some people were saying this must be an Illuminati satanic thing, Lucy, because Lucy is the female version of Lucifer. Right, so I thought they meant, so anyways, go on.
Yeah, I had friends who thought that they were planted by a Zionist conspiracy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Illuminati, Zionist, or whatever planted, but they thought that the name Lucifer is basically, the name Lucy is hinting to that, right? But go on.
Yeah. So anyway, it ended up with me taking the responsibility of actually trying to answer that question, which ended up in me starting a research about Islam and evolution. And I started the research. I'm an engineer by training. I have, my bachelor's and post-bachelor degrees are all in engineering and technical fields. So I started, learning for the first time, really evolution. And what I thought I'm gonna learn in a few days and then write an article about took me months, literally. Of continuous daily research, and it actually deconstructed myself. I deconstructed my knowledge, deconstructed my understanding of life. The whole model of life has changed with what science has discovered for all these years, that it's away from our public understanding. It has always been an issue, the public perception of science. Scientists are in a valley, and people are in a different valley. So I've just understood the theory of evolution. I could not reconcile it with an Islamic version. I could not reconcile it with creationism, and I had to submit to science. And when I did that, it started to deconstruct my Islamic knowledge, and it deconstructed it to the ground, and I had to rebuild a new understanding of Islam, a new understanding of everything that I've studied before.
Well, technically, you say you submitted, so technically, it's still you're Islamic. You're submitting, right? I don't know. I'm just trying to say. No, anyways, never mind. No, but hey, can we actually make that? You could just like Ali says, like a sunnah to blaspheme, because Muhammad did that. We could also say it's Islamic to submit to science, because that's what Islam is, submission.
Right. Yeah. And Armin, you have a problem with reform, and you think that sounds perfectly rational. Okay.
Yeah, but actually, this proves my point. The entire point is like, with reform, people get lazy and they just feel like, instead of questioning things, they just stick with Islam. But then actually, when science actually hits you in the head, when reality hits you in the head, you're like, that's you all of a sudden the comfort that the reform gave you becomes even more uncomfortable. Right. Yeah. So, anyways, I don't want to get into that. But I don't want to get into that because
I need to hear more of the story. So so this is fascinating. So you're so you come from, you're born in the UAE, you go to Lebanon, right? You then go through this. You come to Canada. That's where you become more religious. You start a sort of a reform group. You're faced with the reality of evolution, and now you're kind of stuck. You have to submit to science. So you've done engineering. You've got a thing from Al-Azhar. You've got a thing from Qom. I mean, you seem like you're a pretty educated guy. Yeah. So what made you decide to continue down this line, and how was Muslimish born after that?
Yeah, so of course, after that, I call it enlightenment, for lack of a better term. I had a depression, really, because I'm not a person who grew up with Islam lightly. It has been my way of life since I started forming memory. I've dedicated my life to it. I've basically my high school years, my university years, I was always in Thawb. I was always in Sunnah everywhere. I was always representing, fundamental Islam everywhere. I've spoken. I've dedicated tens of hours. I've gotten married based on Islam, and I've gotten divorced based on Islam. So I've sacrificed a lot for this. I had a very, very emotional relationship with God, and I've spent so many hours with, like, Salat al-Layl, the night prayers, and that was my style of life. I was a very spiritual person.
Just to make it clear to our audience, okay, so the night prayers, if you do them, that means you're really dedicated, because these are the prayers that you don't have to do, right? So imagine you have to do 5 prayers a day, and this is what all Muslims have to do. But then you're adding on top of that, late night, you're doing extra prayers. So that means like you're like that's actually in Iran, for example, to show somebody is to be able to show somebody is very religious, we say like, oh, they do night prayers. Like, holy shit, wow, these people are very religious. But anyways, go on.
So for me, it's a major depression, because all my purpose, my daily life, from the moment I wake up till the moment I sleep, it's all by Islam. I lived second by second by the teachings of Islam. Of course, we're humans. We're always going to have these moments that we resort back to our humanness. But otherwise, I was very, very dedicated, and I had a depression, because now all of a sudden I've lost purpose. I've lost my understanding, and I went through this period of time, and I had no friends that I knew that had the similar experience. And some of my friends, of course, I shared these with them, and some of my friends, they shared my questioning. Some of my friends rejected it. They thought that I am being, manipulated by the shaitan, by, the devil, and that I need to do more prayer. They really felt sympathy for me. They felt that I'm getting lost. So I lost also a lot of friends, and I got more secluded from the community. And then I discovered at a certain point that I have to keep hush about my thoughts, because people don't react, rationally to
Right.
people questioning. You right away become a danger on society. Or sometimes you're looked at like, it reminds me of the interview with Muhammad Hisham, where the scholar told him that you need to leave this interview and go to the hospital, to the mental hospital. You start being looked at as with a mental illness. And I have children, so I also don't want my children to be stigmatized in the community. So I understood that questioning is for intellectuals. I cannot just express my opinion freely, especially living in Dearborn. When you say Dearborn, you're talking about, you have to think of the Middle East. You can't think of America, except for the law.
Can you explain that to people, because people might not know what you're talking about right now?
So, there's the authority of the government, and then there's the authority of society. And when you're living in a society which is the largest Muslim society outside the Islamic world, you're basically living in a Muslim society.
Right. No, so people that might not even know you're talking about is a city. So this is the largest Muslim community, Muslim populated city in North America, correct? In the United States.
Correct. Some say in the world, outside the Islamic world.
Wow.
In terms of density of Muslims in it. But when I went, I came into terms. I started understanding, the purpose of purpose, like they say. And I started, really getting in touch with myself. You see, Islam, the spirituality of Islam, always wants you to annihilate yourself and get in touch with the external being. At that time, I really got in touch with myself. It's kind of like coming back to life. That self that has been annihilated for all these years, now it's the focus of me. It's some Sufis also say that, but. So I went internally and I rediscovered myself, and I re-understood life in a different, positive way, and it actually became more positive. This life became more important. Every second of it is not to be wasted on anything negative. The colors of this life became all of a sudden more vibrant, and this life became such a beautiful place that I don't want to waste any second more. Not enjoying that huge opportunity and very improbable thing that I'm alive in such a beautiful world, this blue planet. So from there on, I started being active with other organizations that promote science, and one of these organizations is called Center for Inquiry. And in 2012, they told me, there is a guy like you in New York. His name is Ibrahim. He's also in touch with CFI in New York, and they got us in touch with each other. And it was an amazing Google Hangout with that guy. And I told him, listen,
Ibrahim Abdullah, who's also previous guest on this podcast. So make sure you go and check out that episode. Yeah.
So I'll leave the rest of the story for that podcast because he narrates the story of also how Muslimish was born. But basically the ishness in it, suffix that when added to a word, it converts a noun into an adjective. It blurs the meaning. It taints it with confusion. It shocks it with hesitation. It makes it somewhat or a bit as it is. So it's not Muslim, but you're kind of a Muslim. And that hesitation, that doubt, that questioning is what we want to embrace. People are uncomfortable with something like that.
Well, I
And
just became uncomfortable by saying you're kind of a Muslim because as an ex-Muslim, I don't think I'm kind of a Muslim at all.
yeah, I mean, you can have that feeling too, of course.
Right.
But we wanted to create a space for those who feel that
Right.
they associate with, because as this social species, it's very hard to separate our culture from our religion, our emotions from our intellectuality.
Mm.
Things get mixed up, and if we are sometimes pre-requiring people to separate them, sometimes people, they just feel it's a difficult task and they avoid it.
Right.
So we wanted to create a space where, just be comfortable with that uncomfort, be comfortable with that doubt, be comfortable with confusion, because that question, and we adopted it as a logo, that question mark is the beginning, is the prerequisite for knowledge.
Yes.
It is the path of knowledge.
Yeah,
Yeah,
when
so
people say that,
but Ali, but this is the reason again. Don't, please, patrons, don't get upset with me. This is another reason why I love what everything you're saying and against the reform, because the whole reform is about making you comfortable about not knowing, and making you comfortable about just accepting that you don't know. The scholar says this verse could mean that, but I like the confusion and embracing that being uncomfortable, embracing the fact that there's something wrong here, and not running away from it. Much more as a strategy. Whether you're still a Muslim that is uncomfortable and you have questions, or you are an ex-Muslim who completely abandon it, embracing that confusion is much better than creating a fake comfort that that the reform does. Anyways, just had to do that. Sorry.
and you honestly do have a way with words, the way that you described it.
Yeah.
Like adding that hesitation, it's almost poetic. So and one other thing I like about this is that, when people talk about, well, there's ex-Muslims and then there's the Muslimish, I don't look at that as two different things. I look at it as linear.
I see it as two different important. No, I see it as two different important things.
No, not you. I've heard people talk about this. I actually think that it's a linear thing. You start with that, you're getting it right when people start to question. And all of us have been through that phase, right? All of us who grew into this, like there was a point when we started questioning, we started doubting. That was one place, and then the rest of it, the when people do become ex-Muslims, that is a destination.
Right.
The Muslimish sort of phase is more of the journey, and I think that
it could also be a destination, though. I actually see
it can be, yeah.
I see Muslimish doing something that is required that the ex-Muslim movement does not offer. It's a home for people that are struggling with Islam, and so ex-Muslim movement does provide content for Muslims that are struggling and doubting, but it doesn't provide a community, a home for Muslims that are struggling and doubting, right? And this is what I love about the Muslimish model rather than the reform model, because it's providing a place for Muslims that are still Muslim and they just confused and have doubting. I think there needs to be a place for them where the ex-Muslim movement is not offering, and I think that's the beauty of it. It could be a destination. I mean, even if it's not a pathway towards being ex-Muslim, that's it's important to tell people that's a perfectly good place to be, for people to make them be okay with just saying, I don't know, I have doubts, right? That's much better than people that are certain. I mean, that's a very honest position to take, and I that's why I love this model.
Right. So we try not to, as a movement, we create a safe space for questioning to take place. And we don't expect people to reach to a specific conclusion, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So we just let them embrace the journey and be comfortable with it, and we respect their journey of the mind. As long as, that there is a questioning factor, because if a person is certain, then I think, when we interview people, when they, apply to any of our meetups in the 12 different cities we are at, one of the questions that the moderator asks them is if they are certain we have certainty about Islam, if they're comfortable with everything about Islam, because if that's where they're at, then Muslimish is not the right place for them. There are other organizations that they might be more comfortable in.
Right.
But Muslim is a place where for people, and this is, Armin, one of the most important things is that I feel that most Muslims are Muslimish.
Mm.
But,
Okay.
it's just that they're comfortable where they're at.
Mm.
But I remember one of our we invited a very important speaker to our first conference in Dearborn, and he stood up and he said, "You know what? I'm a Muslim, and I'm not Muslimish, and I believe in Islam and I believe in Quran, but I don't believe that Prophet Muhammad was the best person who was on earth. I believe my father was." And for me, that was, yes, exactly. You're a Muslimish,
Yes.
because that makes you an apostate.
Right.
And
Yes, it does.
A blasphemer.
Yes, that's blasphemy.
Can
But
I
mean,
quote you on that, by the way? I'm gonna quote you in this. Most Muslims are Muslimish. I love that.
Yeah.
I don't actually. I'm gonna quote you on that, whether you allow me or not. No, so never mind. But another thing, when you mention, I just want to, like, a lot of people in our audience might get triggered by the mention of safe space. I just want to say that this is what safe spaces were meant to be. Like, this is the proper use of a safe space, right? A place where people are actually challenging each other and questioning. Everybody can question everything, rather than a place that, it's not like bubble wrapping people and not letting anybody get hurt by anything. That's not what safe spaces are meant to be.
Right.
This is the proper way. Yeah. Okay. Go
ahead, Ali. I couldn't have said it better. I want to talk more about just your personal thing. Obviously, if there's something over here that you're not comfortable talking about, then let me know. But you mentioned that you got married in Islam. You got divorced in Islam. The reason I want to talk about this is because when people talk about how, hey, this religion doesn't make sense, you have to be secular, what other force is there but reason? They don't realize that a lot of times when you change your mind and you take the step to move forward and think in a different way and approach life in a different way, then you actually lose people in your life. Families break up. There is a much bigger cost than just giving up a set of ideas. So I wanted to actually, and the other thing, you talked about people embracing the journey. You told us a little anecdote when we at your conference at Harvard, which I was at as well, about how you were at the beach and, you said that your daughter at that time, I don't know if she still does, chooses to wear the hijab. She's an adolescent. She chooses to wear it. She knows obviously what you think about it, but you see people looking at you and just judging you like, oh my God, he's making his daughter wear the hijab and he's sitting there in shorts. And you're like, no, not me. But so some of these, I find these aspects of the stories you tell actually the most interesting, because they talk about the consequences of, like, how this affects human beings as people and our families and our relationships. So can you just go into, if you're comfortable with it, just talk about what happened with your marriage and divorce and whether that had anything to do with any of this?
Yeah, I mean, instead of me talking about my personal story, maybe I'll just mention, because I live in a community of also Muslimish and people that we connect with, and I hear things all the time. So I'm going to share with you, some of the things that also affected me, in that same storyline. So, for example, I was talking to a friend of mine. And he was questioning also, but then all of a sudden he felt that he needs to stop questioning. And when I asked him why is that, why all of a sudden you feel that you feel scared all of a sudden, he said, my father died out of cancer. I was in a young age. And I've always imagined that I'm gonna be meeting him again.
Aww.
And I know that this line of questioning might let me lose that vision. And I know it is the rational thing to do. And I know 100% I'm gonna get to that. Like I know it. I know that I'm gonna go there, but I prefer to stay in this fantasy. I and I couldn't understand that.
Yeah.
But I thought about it for a while afterwards, and maybe because I don't have the same personal experience, but people, religion becomes part of the tissue of our emotions. And sometimes taking out some parts of religion or taking out religion altogether is like ripping parts of yourself. And sometimes it's fatal sometimes. It's not an easy surgery. It has to be done with so much care. It needs a support system. It needs sympathy. Because it intermixes, and that's why indoctrinating children with religion is such a horrible thing.
Right.
It's such a horrible thing. It's something that I'm very publicly condemning all the time, is that let them decide for themselves, because you are hurting them so much. So personal stories, I mean, there are numerous stories. I mean, the thing is, I feel that I've experienced lots of pain, and I've lost a lot of opportunities in life because of religion, because of my understanding of religion, because of Islam. And I want others, I wish someone has come to me early on to free my mind from that shackles. And that's why I feel that, just like I wish that someone 10 years, I would have won 10 more years of my life. If someone has reached out to me, I want to reach out. I want to do my duty. I want to reach out to other people, just in case. I'm not like recruiting or, trying to convert people. Each person has their personal journey, but just be there if they need me for support. Just be there if they're looking for knowledge or truth or information.
So can you give some... Oh, go on, sorry.
Go ahead, Armin.
No, I just wanted some examples from what you lost because of Islam.
I'll just give you a technical example, not to go to the a lot like the heavy emotional stuff.
I went the heavy emotional stuff as well, though. All right, go.
Yeah, the reason we're pushing you, Wissam, and it's not that, again, if you're not comfortable talking about it, that's perfectly fine. A lot of people aren't, but the reason we are is because these are the things that people really relate to. They're, when you said right now, I'll give you an example. When you told me the story about that guy when his father died, and he said, I just want to be in this space where I have hope that I'll see him again. I felt the exact same way when my father died in 2001. By that time, I was already an atheist. I didn't really used to talk about it that much, but I remember I had an uncle, and now I'll tell you a quick sort of story. One of my uncles who lived in Montreal, he also died recently. So he was there, and he was very secular. It was kind of like you. And everybody was praying and they were doing all this stuff. And I just kind of wanted to stay in that space. And like, I do want to see him again, and I didn't want to. I was very, very uncomfortable. And then he came and he just told me one thing. I asked him about it. I was like, is it going to happen? What do you think? Is there anything after this? Is there like whatever? I don't know, like afterlife, quantum physics. I don't know. Like I didn't understand anything at the time. And he just looked at me. He's like, it's in your DNA. He's alive. He's alive. He's through you. He's actually physically alive through you. You don't need spirituality. You don't need anything. It's right there in your genetics. And for some reason, that just hit me, and it solved the problem. It may not work that way for everybody, but just like when you told me that story, I got reminded of this. The more
Thanks for sharing
these things and the more things like this that you talk about, I think there may be other people who are listening to this who would hear it. But again, only what you're comfortable with.
That's true.
When my mom died, people kept on asking me, like, aren't you sad that you're not going to see her again? If you're an atheist and don't believe in God and stuff, and like, hey, I'm just happy she's not in hell, right? Because everybody keeps talking about afterlife as if it's just about heaven. Afterlife comes the package. And they kept on telling us most of our lives that most people are going to end up in hell. And my mom didn't pray. My mom drank alcohol. My mom didn't go to the mosque. And most likely, based on everything what they told us, if anything about Islam was true, my mom would have been in hell right now. So I I'm actually very happy to know that my mom is not right now being tortured by a sadistic God. And if afterlife even introduced a slight possibility of that, it's better that she's completely gone than even a slight chance of that. So, anyways, that's what I thought. So, I didn't want there to be any afterlife. But it's not like the universe checks with us what we want to see what's real or not. But can you give us the technical example, and also, if you're comfortable, after that, the heavy emotional one?
Yeah, I mean, one of the most beautiful thing, by the way, that I've heard in that is Richard Dawkins' opening statement in Unweaving the Rainbow. And some people, they actually ask for that passage to be read in their eulogies. This is how powerful it is, where he says that it starts saying that we die and that's why we're lucky. And then he goes on. It's a beautiful passage, really, and it puts it really positively. And the gist of it is that it was such a beautiful opportunity to be alive in the beginning. So no matter what, everything else is natural. And I'm glad that, there isn't someone who's really picking and choosing who's surviving and who's dying. That I feel is much worse trauma than just accepting nature and science and natural factors. So one of the things, for example, when I graduated from engineering, I got an offer in AT&T in Seattle, and I had like promised a form of nether, we call in Islam. It's kind of a formal Islamic promise that if I finish my degree with honors, that I will perform Hajj. So I got the offer from AT&T, and I told them, okay, I accept it, but I have to take 20 days off in March. And the interviewer told me, Wissam, even our CEO doesn't get 20 days off a year. And you're just starting in your entry position. But the belief that we were taught that your rizq, your bounties, your what do you call it? Wherever you earn is written for you, that nobody can change it, made me careless about what this guy is saying, because you're not going to change the way I'm going to earn anything. If it's written for me, I'm going to have it. If not, then not. Then I told them, yeah, well, this is something I have to do. And of course, they withdrew the offer.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and I went to Hajj in the year 2000. So that's one thing. And many examples. I mean, I used to take the example of the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet, Ahlul Bayt. How. Imam Ali, who's the cousin of the Prophet and one of the early Muslims, used to leave his children for months and months and months. And then he came back from a battle that took him a few months. And then the Prophet Muhammad sent him to Yemen for 6 months. He barely saw his kids for a couple of days. I took that as an example for me, as sacrifice. Like, I can sacrifice seeing my daughter in this life and make this up in the hereafter.
Wow.
And I was involved with tabligh. So every weekend, I would work Monday through Friday, and then in the weekends, we would either go camping with the Muslim scouts, or we would go in tabligh. We would go to propagate Islam in different cities. Taking that sacrifice.
Tabligh means advertising.
Right. Yeah. Propagating, advertising Islam. So sacrifice, concept of sacrifice. There's a big package in Islam that makes you belittle your time in this life, belittle the quality of this life, for something that is in the hereafter. And that is, I feel, this is one of the most dangerous things in Islam.
Yes, because more than suicide bombing, more than war,
because
more than
terrorism is a minority.
Exactly.
But most Muslims, they hurt each other and they hurt themselves by this concept.
Themselves. Yes. More than anything else.
They neglect.
The neglect.
This is such an important point. I don't want people to miss this, because every time we talk about the cost of religion, people think about war and suicide bombing,
terrorism,
and child molesting priests and stuff like that. But all of that is important and tragic, but it's a small fringe cost compared to what just was explained here. If you add up all of the costs and all of the misery and all the opportunities missed, all the every single moment that was spent on another life rather than this one, all of that, the cost of that is way more than what you see in the news when it comes to the cost of religion. But anyway.
And one example to that is hijab itself.
Mm-hmm.
This subtle self-flagellation. With all due respect to all the hijabis, the hijab girls, they're comfortable with it. I respect your choice. I respect, and I defend your right wherever you are to wear the way you want. But my personal opinion is that that must be for the vast majority according to just biology, and it must be uncomfortable. And it's against the nature of a human being. So that's just a subtle example of self-flagellation, and I've struggled with that. Imagine all the strict laws of Islam for looking, gazing at girls. Imagine a guy going through high school and college, having to self-flagellate for that. Having to self-control, having to self-censor every little look or feeling, or it is torturous. It's impossible. Biology always wins, and you're setting up people for failure, and that's why they will always feel ashamed. They will always feel guilty. They will always be seeking forgiveness. I have a friend of mine who's very religious, and he's an angel, and he's lived, he's in his 50s now, and he's, whenever he talks to me, he's just so anxious for the forgiveness of God. And I said, what did you ever do? I mean, what kind of a God that will punish you for anything? I mean, don't you see yourself? Like, what did you ever harm compared to the evildoers? That itself is such a feeling that is an obstacle in front of the progress of civilization, or it's unnatural. It's a excessive delusion.
So when it comes to the hijab, I think you're right about the feeling that it gives the people that are wearing it, and I think it's more than. The message that it sends is more than just the discomfort of wearing the hijab, right? And I think like the discomfort is secondary to the main damage that the hijab does, because some people. I mean, I grew up in a country where hijab was mandatory, and most of the women around me were extremely liberal, and they mostly complain about the hijab in summertime, not in winter. Like every time it got really hot, the complaints about hijab was more than ever before. But the thing is that discomfort itself, I think, is secondary to the fact that what we are telling the people that are wearing it and what it shows about their position in society, right? And the example I give to that is that imagine if you are talking to me and my wife, and the three of us are speaking, and while I'm speaking, all of a sudden my wife interrupts me, and I look at her and I say, "You just interrupted me. Go sit in the corner for half an hour and think about what you just did." And she listens, and she goes sits down in the corner of the living room. And you just look at me in amazement, like, "What the hell just happened? What did you just do? This is horrific, the way you're treating your wife." And I could respond to you and be like, "What is wrong with sitting down? Sitting down is not that hard to do. We could just sit down together, and that's not so hard. You could, in fact, I'm feeling tired right now, and I want to sit down right now." But that's not the point, is it? The point is that there's there's a major problem in this relationship. You just by that you see that if she has to listen to me and she does listen to me, you see that this is not a healthy relationship. You see that you realize about her position in this relationship and my role in this relationship, and just this act by itself indicates everything else that is wrong about our relationship, right? And indicates all the other ways that she probably is wrong in our relationship just by visiting that. So in a society where you live, where you get to tell women that you need to wear this and they have to listen, and it just shows you their position in society. And worse is when they feel themselves that, yeah, I have to wear this, right? Because it has the internalized, like for example, if I tell my wife that you have to sit down, and she listens, and you may tell her to, no, get up, you don't have to do this. If she comes and tells you like, no, this is right, I have to listen, I have to sit down here because I did something wrong, that doesn't make it better. You can't just be like, oh no, that's her choice then. That shows that it's even worse. The situation is even worse, that she has accepted this. But anyways, I went for too long.
Yeah, no, that was actually that's a really good
point.
analogy.
That's a good point. Yes.
And I've heard you say it before, but like it's but I keep forgetting it. But that's a really good way to illustrate it.
Right.
But so Wissam, just moving on to where you live, I've seen that you're relatively open about where you live. You do these conferences in Dearborn. I mean, I've been there. It's again the largest sort of Muslim community. You are fairly open about how. Sorry.
The largest Muslim community in the United States.
In the United States,
right.
You are relatively open about the kind of work you do and what you think. How does it play? I mean, there are probably a lot of people who listen to this or wondering if you have any security issues, whether you take any precautions, whether you've ever felt like there are people out to get you and they don't like what you do. So how does that play into it? Or has it changed over the years? What is sort of the situation when it comes to security?
Yeah, I mean, to tell you the truth, really, I'm a respected member of the community. I have contributed a lot, and I continue to contribute. I'm active in many nonprofit organizations. I seem to be a controversial person. I'm brave about what I feel, what I think, and I'm brave to change my opinion whenever I get convinced otherwise. And I express that publicly on my social media, etc., on my website, blog, etc. I've always spoken what I believe, and I continue to do so. I believe in the truth. I believe that the word has to be out there, and I like the collective mind when I post something and I feel I read the comments and opinions. It actually shapes better my opinion, and I feel enriched by the other opinions and comments, even if they're negative. I see other people's perspective and how they. So I don't feel, and we have a secular also presence in the community. We're trying to make it more outspoken, claim its presence. Since the 60s in Dearborn, Islam has claimed the agenda of the community, but secularism is on the rise. And we have many organizations coming up that represent the more unreligious or secular, part of society. Also, the newer generation does not connect with religion the same way the previous generation. I mean, research has shown that very clearly, especially with the attitude towards LGBTQ, etc. So, there is a free-thinking society, a new organization in Dearborn that celebrates secularism. Muslimish has been active, and other organizations that are actually secular. And I feel that most of the community is. It's just that silent, that Islam has a community power. Religion has a power of building communities, and that's something that the secular movement is learning, how to build communities otherwise.
Yeah, so you're talking about the younger people, how they're dissociating from religion. Just in your observation, since you live right in the midst of it, because many of us don't. A lot of us who are a part of this sort of ex-Muslim movement or secular Muslim movement, whatever, we're not always closely in touch with it. But since you're surrounded by it, do you have any personal observations of what young people are like in terms of how you used to see it when you were younger, and comparing that to this new generation that's growing up around you, especially in the US?
Yeah, so unfortunately, there are a lot of indoctrinations for younger people through camps and special programs for youth that is devout from critical thinking. It's not like they're encouraging people to have critical thinking and question and understand Islam. No, it's just teaching them how to accept and feel the same way as this template, and they do recruit a lot of youth, and there are a lot of youth that are continue to be active generation after generation. They have translated everything into English. They're rapping about Imam Hussein. They're they're doing majalis in English. The traditional Iraqi way of reciting funeral passages, and eulogies of Imam Hussein and the Shia school of thought, all the martyrs of the family of the Prophet. They have converted that tradition into English. They've created plays. They've, some youth are stuck in that environment.
They're very clever about their marketing. I've seen their methods. It's amazing what they came up with.
Right, but at the end of the day, there is also universities. There's education, which is our resort. Is the public education, is getting these critical thinking skills in the schools, getting the education in the schools, getting to study biology and evolution in the school, and then growing up in these academic institutions to question and understand and analyze and understand fact from myth. If these institutions are not doing that, they're betraying us. They're betraying the whole progress of civilization. They're betraying the Enlightenment movement. They are betraying hundreds of years of progress. It goes back to this biology teacher in grade 9. They are carrying the torch of the Enlightenment. And if they don't do the right job, especially if they want to cater to making the parents happy instead of teaching kids science, then it's a disaster.
So just one more question on this. You said that you are, you're a respected member of your community. You work with a lot of other organizations as well that are not necessarily related to secularism and everything, just in terms of community building. Do you ever get, when you do your work with Muslimish, when you do your work with the secularization or ex-Muslims and so on, do you ever get any insights from the other Muslim community work that you do in terms of what they're doing right? Because, you talked about this. They're doing camps, they're doing the majalis in English, and they're doing all of this stuff. What is it that we in the secular movement are not doing that they're doing that is so powerful in terms of community, in terms of giving activities to young people to do, or providing some kind of meaning, identity, whatever it is? I mean, what are your observations of what we can learn from them?
Yeah, so this is a big subject. We actually had a conference about building communities before. So there are certain elements that work very well, whether it is with religion, but they're very common with religion, or any movement for building a community. And there are many of them, but some of them are rituals, for example, creating rituals.
Yes.
Rituals make us happy. Creating bonding, creating an environment of acceptance and bonding, inner circles, outer circles. So you go to the mosque, and there are the outer circle, and then you have few families that you're friends with that you're gonna go have dinner with after Friday prayer. That's the inner circle. So creating the environment for larger circles, inner circles. The values, shared values, It's very, very important to have shared values that are common language between us. This is a successful element of building community. There is really much to learn about building communities. It's not something that is only in religions. It's something that has evolved through our culture. We've depended on it. It formed tribes before, and now it forms communities.
Yeah, actually, this is something I was just speaking about in Toronto. Ali was there as well. And I think rituals is one important part. And again, it's hard for us. It's hard for people like me to understand this because we don't need them, and we think like other people shouldn't need them either. But that's not the reality. We should like try to understand humans not based on our own experience, but based on what's data shows. And people apparently need rituals, so we need to provide them that in a less harmful way than religion. And one thing I'll say, I think really helps when it comes to building these communities or tribes or stuff like that is stories, right? They need Genesis stories, and they need Genesis stories that has heroes and villains in there. And what I'm thinking of doing is like coming up with tribes that is based on heroes and villains and stories that is based in reality. And another thing, these stories need to be old. Again, these are stuff that I don't need, and I will never understand why people need them, but they do need them. And this is one thing I like about the Enlightenment is that it has stories. You could go into the story of. I was thinking of creating, a tribe that is based on the Enlightenment, and we already have this heroes. We have Voltaire, we have John Locke, we could add even Ibn Sina and Khayyam, Omar Khayyam. And again, that's something. The speech was recorded, so I'm going to upload that. I'll send you a link so you could check it out. If let me know what you think.
Yeah, it was really good, and it's a lot of things actually, Armin, that we've been talking about on this podcast. I remember we've been talking about like the using of reason, and then like I remember I've talked so much about like the storytelling aspect and bringing art into it, learning what we can do, and so have you. Like it's just in terms of rituals. I want to get. I'm actually going to be getting Phil Zuckerman on the podcast, who talks about secularizing religion, and he actually discusses all of this stuff in detail. So it'll be kind of interesting to have that conversation too. But I agree that we do need a lot of that. I noticed something. I learned a lot from the Jordan Peterson phenomenon, and Jordan Peterson, not a huge fan, but a lot of people I knew that were atheists, who had just come off the whole new atheism thing with Richard Dawkins, Dennett, Hitchens, and Sam Harris, and all of that, and they're flocking to Jordan Peterson, who's talking about the Bible and talking about reconnecting to Christianity and talking about biblical archetypes and the importance of them and doing courses on that, and people just eating up these lectures. And the reason they were doing it was because he was giving them a sense of meaning in their lives, especially a lot of young, men who feel, for whatever reason, I mean, the world is changing. They don't have the same kind of position that they did throughout history. Everything's becoming more and more progressive, which overall, in my opinion, is a force for good with some issues. But what he did was he provided a sense of meaning, and that immediately alerted me to the fact that all of this stuff with the new atheism was working very well on me. But for most people out there who are looking for that sense of belonging and that meaning, it wasn't working for them. So it's exactly, what Armin was saying, is that for us, we don't need it. So we somehow assume that everybody else must be like us, but apparently,
or could be not. Like us. Or could be like us.
So, and one thing that I get from you, Wissam, the way that you speak, just overall, I don't know if it's the Imam left in you and the speaking in the inspirational way or whatever it is, but when you speak, you sound a lot to me like when the way that you would describe Richard Dawkins' rights, or the way that Carl Sagan used to speak.
I was getting a Carl Sagan vibe the entire time you were speaking.
Yeah, it's weird when you talk. There's a weird kind of. This sounds really, really creepy. I'm sorry. Don't feel creeped out, but there's a weird. It doesn't actually. I react emotionally to it, and I wonder if.
Mashallah. It got
Mashallah. You
I
got
think
Armin to say mashallah.
I think
Yeah.
I think all of us actually we speak from our hearts, and that's why it really gets we're not only speaking, I'm not teaching or speaking about mathematics. I'm speaking about something that has affected my life, continues to affect my life, continues to affect everyone around me who I love every day. It's such a topic that, like, I know that tonight there are a lot of pain that can be relieved just with a little bit of removing some of these delusions, removing some of these. I know a lot of people tonight are sleeping with shame. Some people are sleeping with suppression. The amount of suppression, I mean, I don't want to even get to that. The amount of suppression, like suppressing everything that is natural and beautiful about us. There's a lot of work for us to do, and it all goes back to education, which is our last resort, and really confronting everything else. The stories part is very important that you mentioned both. I heard you also speak about it in Harvard, Ali. Yeah, the story. I mean, our mind works in stories. It doesn't work in facts and bullets. So the story part is and we have a rich history of stories. I mean, I want to say something that might be useful for others. That when 2008 I was researching, I was hit with the four horsemen. I was hit with I was just in the perfect timing when that wave was coming out of scientists speaking out. Richard Dawkins and Hitchens and Daniel Dennett and all these Sam Harris and some say some especially liberal apologists, sometimes they feel that some of these were harsh. But it actually, I listened to Carl Sagan all my life.
Yeah.
But it never stirred questioning in me. He was so nice. I was always saying Subhanallah after his statements, because he was so nice. He was focused on science and trying not to touch any sentiments of people. But when Richard Dawkins was speaking before and others were speaking before, but when they decided that no, we're gonna put our hand on the cut and show people that there's a cut here, although it's painful, it stirred me. And it stirred me. And the first time I was trying to actually answer, at that time, the God delusion came out. And I was trying to formulate answers to it. But then I started, understanding his points, and he started coming through to me and understanding his point of view and his concern about humanity and about people's perception of science, etc. So sometimes we need to be a little bit vocal, be a little bit, aggressive a little bit, to make people understand that it's called understanding by shock. Letting them hear the shock, because that's one of the ways of understand. Not everyone understands by smooth ways. So I appreciate people who are harsh with me. I appreciate that.
No, I see,
and
I
actually,
see what you're saying.
And I also think that it's if you do not provide that, then if you think you're being nice to people by not being aggressive, by not providing that alternative, just imagine the people that would have thanked you that are not thanking you because you were being nice to them, and you took something from them. I think you denied them an alternative way of thinking, and that's not at all nice. That's not being nice to people. You think you sound nice, but you're actually denying them an alternative way of looking at the world. But go on, Aaron.
And the other thing is, like, I do agree that I think that different approaches work on different people, and this I always talk about myself and Alishba, who my wife. She had the same experience you did. She was kind of going through like a Ismaili background, went through a Sufi phase, and then she was this guy that she knew once was having a discussion with her, and then she said something sort of I don't know what it was, but he just told her, he's like, well, I don't know what you, that's just stupid. And she got really pissed, and that eventually was the trigger that got her to where she is now, just sort of like what you're describing. For me, though, Carl Sagan was a huge thing. I was that actually did make me question. I did start questioning even when I was younger. I mean, I guess you're right in the sense that I didn't really start really questioning. I became more agnostic, but he opened up avenues. He made me look at things, and it was in very stark contrast to what I was hearing around me in Saudi Arabia, because I was growing up in Saudi Arabia, so it was a very, very different thing that I was hearing there. So I think different approaches do work on different people, and it's just a really good thing that we have all these different voices here.
Right. Yeah. I do appreciate you mentioning the shame, because I think that's again, it's not another one of the major costs, right? I don't know if people appreciate how much shame and how much disgust and how much self-hate exists out there because of religion and because of what people are just looking at the desires that they naturally have, or about who they are and what they want, and the dreams and the things that they're afraid of and the things that they're questioning. And just the mere questioning makes them feel with hatred for themselves, the fact that they can't be certain about things, the fact that they want things that they're not supposed to be wanting. And I think that this amount of self-hatred is extremely damaging, and the amount of misery that is causing, I think a lot of people don't understand how big of a deal that is. So it's, yeah.
And if Muslims just think like sometimes in the bigger picture, like what if you look at Muhammad as a person? I mean, Muhammad has come to a society that had a very uniform belief, and
allegedly,
and he revolted against that general belief, that general customs, and he was a minority for years, and for 13 years in Mecca. Basically, it was an unsuccessful message. Just few slaves and children and few relatives and one or two friends who followed him. And he revolted against that system. What if the message to be learned from Muhammad is how to question what you have inherited? Instead of just inheriting what Muhammad has taught, why not learning from his actions rather than learning from his words, and learn how to question what you have inherited from your parents and society, and what kind of revolution you want to do, like Muhammad did a revolution and chose the way of life that he believed was the better way and that made more sense. So sometimes God. Muslims have to break these these barriers that make them think in a certain way and think just in a larger picture. In Irshad, we've chosen to, what if we want to select? I mean, the Quran comes from a beautiful structure, a lot of beautiful language, beautiful eloquence in it. It also comes from poetry. It comes from a long heritage. It's not coming from a vacuum. So there are a lot of positive messages in the Quran. There are messages that are negative messages in the Quran that probably do not, at least we can say, is that do not fit our age at all. They're considered improper now. Some, of course, you can also argue that they're improper all the time, of course. But why not be selective? Why not select what isn't Islam? Didn't the Prophet do the same thing? He selected from Christianity. He selected from Judaism. He selected from paganism. Half of the Hajj was pagan. Even the prayer was pagan. He selected the things that worked and that were positive. And why not we select things that are also positive for us?
Can I change a little bit what you said to make it more in line with my promotion of enlightenment rather than Islamic reform, which is sounding a little bit like that.
Exactly. That was a message for Muslims, Armin.
Yeah, I know. But when it comes to brand, I'm going to change it a little bit just to make it like I like them both, but I'm just changing it a little bit to tell you what my style would be. I would say look at what Muhammad did. You could follow, but I would. So you're saying that Muhammad was doing going rebelling basically, and that's what maybe that's the message as well, that to question and change and see what works, right? But what I would change is like, okay, yeah, see that what worked and maybe follow that model, even if it wasn't Muhammad's intention to teach you that, because it's obvious that it was not in his intention to teach you that. His intention was like, no, follow Islam. This is the final message. This is perfect. You don't need to do what I did anymore, because I'm the seal of the prophets. I mean, you could see in the Quran and the Hadith that the message was that you go ahead now and you question everything as well, including Islam. That was not the message. It's pretty obvious that was not the message. But what you could say that even if that was not the message, you could learn this from it, right? You could but be honest about the fact that the intention was not that. The intention was not for you to follow Muhammad's way and question everything and rebel. The intention was you to follow Islam without questioning. But you could still learn from Muhammad's success that maybe you could do what Muhammad did, right?
True, I agree with you 100%. That's why I call it reimagine Islam, not reinterpret.
Exactly. Perfect. Oh my God, I'm going to use that line as well.
I think this may be one of the most fun things that Armin has ever come across, like this alternative to. But
also when it comes to picking and choosing from the Quran, as long as you understand that the source of the picking and choosing is you. It's not God that is, so given that you are deciding what's good and what's not, it is your moral standards. You have a superior moral standards than the book that you're looking at. And if you are deciding what's good and what's not, that means the source is not the book. You're the source. If you understand that, then go ahead and pick and choose.
Yes, and I can explain this Islamically. I know this is not the place to do it, but I mean, there is... regarding reform, I know that we didn't want to jump into the subject that we've mentioned 100 times today, but I know I've heard you're talking about this. I mean, I hear your podcast, guys. This is, and I love your podcast about circumcision. That's for me like a reference. Now, anyone who wants, I don't even talk to them about the subject. I just send them to that because that really covered it very well. But so regarding reform, I've given a talk in New York, abolish versus reform, and it might be, I understand the point of view that maybe abolish is the right thing. I understand if you say that. I understand if you say that abolish is the right thing. But sometimes we're not talking about the right thing. Sometimes we're talking about, what would happen? Like what's that? It's like politics. What's realistic? What's natural? What's more natural is for things to evolve and reform. Because we've seen, it's a whole talk I gave, but we've seen trials of trying to abolish things, and they actually backfire. Even the French Revolution, decades of de-Christianization of the country, it backfired to bring the church up and strong, and it was harmful actually. The de-Christianization, if you go to France and you see everything that was destroyed in the name of de-Christianization, it was, although it wasn't the name of enlightenment or reason, it was harmful. So I feel that reform might be more natural. Not everyone needs it. But
okay, do we have another hour or two now?
No, we don't have. But
no, can I just? I know what
you're going to say, but I have to say one thing before, because I know you're going to talk for longer. So I just have to say one thing that I actually. So this is one place where I disagree with it. I think that what is realistic is what you guys are doing with the questioning and the doubt and the space for that. The reform people, just over time, having seen what's going on with it, I don't feel that it has gone as far as what you're doing.
That's the one that has backfired.
What ex-Muslims are doing. There are more people now saying that, okay, I'm leaving this, than there are. Nobody prospectively becomes a reformer. You're talking about the French Revolution. You're talking about the Enlightenment. You're talking about like the Voltaire and the Rousseau and all of that. Those are not people who said, let's reform it. Let's dilute it and change it a little bit. They didn't do that. It's actually reform happens when you have people who go out and they try to abolish and completely disrupt something, and then the result of that is this sort of watered down, diluted version. You don't start with the watered down, diluted version. And that's why I think that reform is more of it's a byproduct.
Yes.
But I don't think it should be a prospective ambition. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, I'll take the byproduct as accepting it as an ally rather than
yes, we do that.
No. Okay.
Even Armin does that, I think.
Well, ally the people, not the concept. Okay,
yes,
first of all, we know like Ali said, the reform is a byproduct. It's a defensive byproduct of a larger movement, which is the abolish movement. Right? The abolish movement causes the reform movement to happen. It's not that people decide to reform a religion. Even with Christianity or Islam, people decide to reform them because people are challenging the religion. So some people try to keep the religion alive by trying to reform it. It's a defense mechanism. It's not something that started the whole thing, right? So even if you like reform, you push for abolishing it because you get reform as a side product when you actually attack the religion, right?
You have a better chance of achieving reform if you use the abolish thing, even if you don't want to.
Yeah, but also
historically.
But when it comes to, but here's the thing: even if it's a side product, I still don't accept it. I don't accept the reform movement as an ally. I accept the reformers, the people that are trying to do reform as an ally, because they usually have the same goals. When they're fighting for secularism, when they're fighting for democracy, when they're fighting for free speech or women's rights and gay rights, I see them as allies because they're pushing for the same things. The only thing that I do not support them on is when they try to give the religion credit for all the great work they're doing. They're doing all the great work, and I support them in the great work they're doing, and I try to help them in the great work they're doing. I just stop short when they say, oh, by the way, this is Islam, this is Christianity, and try to give the religion credit for it. I try to cry because that's what makes it the Islamic reform. It's not Islamic. If you do secularism, or if you do women's rights, or if you do gay rights, that's just pushing for great ideas. It becomes Islamic reform when you add Islam, when you actually try to give Islam credit for it, and that's damaging. And I try to stop that. Again, I'm not against reform. I'm against Islamic reform. I'm for Muslims reform. What you're advocating for is Muslims reforming, and I'm for that. Muslims reform by being less influenced by Islam, right? And another thing is that when you think that this what we're trying to do is unrealistic, we're not abolishing. It's not like, oh, it's too much for some people, but pushing for Enlightenment values is you say like evolving is a more natural thing. Yeah, we're also pushing for just baby steps or evolving. Like I said, pushing for reform, if you understand that what Islamic reform means, reinterpreting verses, that's lying to people. But you could evolve, you could slowly evolve, and you could get baby steps by doing what you're doing, by providing a home for people that are questioning, doubting, being confused. That's not understanding things, admitting that you don't understand it. That's intellectually honest. And that's also a slow progress. That's baby steps. But the difference between that and reforming is that it doesn't involve lying to people about obvious scripture. Again, so when people say, oh, abolish or reform, abolish seems too harsh, some people need reform, they don't understand that the whole pushing for abolishing also has its own baby steps, also has its own evolving process. That is not all or none. It's not atheism or nothing else. But even though it has baby steps, it doesn't involve pushing for religion, and it doesn't involve lying to people. Anyways.
Right. I mean, Muslimish is obvious about what they're doing. We're not doing reform in Muslimish, as you see. But what I mean is, and of course this needs like an episode by itself, but in the meanwhile, what's going to happen, and it's natural in every religion, just like what happened to Reform Judaism and what happened to Reform Christianity in all its thousands of forms, it's inevitable. I mean, I can talk about the history of Islamic reform too. It's just late. Islamic reform is late, but it is happening. And I can give you examples. We don't have time.
No, you don't have to. And because I agree with you, like a definite side product of us pushing for abolishing religion is reform movements, right? Many reform movements. I agree that that's inevitable.
Sometimes it's a byproduct. Sometimes it's initiated by itself. But
no, but what I'm saying, just because I agree with you that it will definitely happen, that doesn't mean that we have to push for it. Just because we don't have to make it stronger. We don't have to advertise.
Well, I mean, Wissam's saying that they're not pushing for it. We're not. Right. I think we're we agree more than we disagree.
Right. Yeah. But me as an individual, myself, and I know this is a unique situation. I am part of a reform movement, and I am part of a non-reform movement at the same time. So I can find that duality in working with both organizations, but that needs more time to talk about really, and how can I manage being in both and being pragmatic to that extent.
I disagree with. I think one of them is not only not helpful. One of them, pushing for the reform movement, is pushing for keeping the religion relevant for longer. I think
all of the negative things that we talked about, like people's shame and all of that. Yeah.
And I think given that pushing for abolishing the religion already gets you the reform side product, why not just keep pushing for reform? Because reform is a side product and an excuse to keep the religion relevant for longer. And we don't want to keep the religion for longer. Even if you enjoy some of the side products from the reform movement, well, then keep pushing for more abolishment of religion, because you're going to get the side product anyways.
Yeah. I'd love to hook you up with someone who will speak on behalf of a large reform Islamic movement.
Okay, let's do that.
And that would be
we'd love that.
That would be really wonderful. Yeah.
We can finally have like a full like proper episode on that.
Yes.
And really... we could tell the patrons that are tired of this discussion to just skip that episode, because
no, and then I will, and on that episode I will probably just sit back and just get some popcorn, and I don't even have to say a word. But it was thank you so much, man. I mean, this was just so the way that you speak. I was thinking when you're talking about Muharram and Majalis, I was wondering if we should do a thing for kids. The way that you're talking, I feel like it's a kind of thing that young people and children should do. Like maybe do like I did this like some time ago, many years ago. I think it was 2006, 7 or something like that. Where the 10 days of Muharram, everybody in my family was going to all these majalis. And so what I did was I got like a bunch of people who were like me, mostly younger people, and I had them come over to my place, and I put on videos of, I think the BBC Horizon series was big then, with all the Brian Cox documentaries about time, and there was another one about relativity, another one about consciousness. We would do that. Then I found this movie about the Imam Hussein, the Karbala thing, and we talked about it critically. So every day we watched a different thing, and it was a lot of fun. I just never did it since then, and now I'm wondering if we can actually take, because we're talking about rituals and everything, maybe we take that and we turn it into a sort of a camp majalis type thing for kids, and talk to them about all of these things, the stuff that we're talking about today. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I wonder
there are a lot of experiments out there in building communities and rituals. You're going to be speaking on October 25th, the day before the conference.
I will, yes.
In the Center for Humanistic Judaism, which is basically an atheistic Judaism movement, and they have created a humanistic rituals, which you will witness. By yourself.
I want to see that. How come I'm not invited to any of these events?
You are invited, Arm. If you can make it,
no.
we will be honored.
Are you already gone by then? Oh shit, you're gonna be.
Yeah, I'm going to be in Philippines.
Yeah, I've always said that.
No, I'm still doing events and stuff. People are still like inviting me to go speak at their events and stuff, but I'm not going to be able to just go to events because I can't afford the flights myself. So I have to like get invited so they bring me over. So, but
sure.
Yeah. But I'm going to be, I think, in Israel in November. So that's another event I'm going to be speaking.
This event is about science and Islam. So we focused really on inviting, scientists.
I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Don't take it seriously.
No, definitely. You are on our radar. We would love to have.
I'm honored to be on your radar.
Yeah. So I'm gonna plug the event. Well, not just because I'm speaking at it, but October 26th. This is in Michigan.
Link in
Detroit,
the description.
Michigan.
Link in the description to go.
Link is it's in the description. Go to muslimish.org if you want to find out more about not just about the event, October 26th, but also about just Wissam and the work that he does, Ibrahim, and what Muslimish does. And it is
follow them. Link again. Follow them on Twitter and Facebook. Link in the description.
Yep. And
of course,
I'm going to.
People, we are just a member. There are many people who are doing great jobs in Muslimish.
Yeah.
No,
it's a fantastic organization that needs it. I really like the work they do, and they need a little more attention. They're doing more work the work that they're doing deserves a lot more attention than it's getting. So go follow them and support them in any way you can.
Yep. And the thing, October 25th, I'll be speaking at the Center for Humanistic Judaism in Detroit. It's going to be a talk about, it's going to be Islam in quotes versus Muslim in quotes. And what does the word Muslim mean, how that evolves into Muslimish and so on. So it'll be a kind of interesting topic on the idea of identity, because, you've got atheist Jews talking about it. I've got a book called The Atheist Muslim, so it'd be kind of interesting.
Is the difference, though? Muslim is not an ethnicity.
No religion. Really, Armin, that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about.
I'm not telling you. I'm telling the audience. Jesus, I know you know.
But there are similarities. There is a formulation of nationalism within the Islamic identity, which we can talk about later.
We're going to discuss all of that.
Like Darul Islam and Darul Harb. Is that what you're referring to?
No. We're going to be talking about how the word Muslim is evolving, and in some places it can be considered as a birth identity, sort of like Gallup and Pew consider it to be.
You guys are just trying to change the definition of Muslim. I'm gonna fight that. But anyways,
you haven't even heard the talk. You have no idea what
I'm guessing. Is it okay to guess?
It's okay to guess. So in any case, we're gonna do that, and then it'll be the conference the next day on Islam and science. I also want to the next episode that you're gonna hear after this one is going to be an excellent talk that Armin did on called Enlightenment Values Under Attack. He did it here in Mississauga. I was in the audience, and it was just fantastic. I've never heard Armin actually properly just riff and go solo and just talk like that. I've heard him react, but like I absolutely loved it. He covered the religion thing, criticism of religion. He covered it in the context of the culture wars that are happening right now, and it was just all encompassing and probably one of the most relevant things that you're going to hear for the times that we're living in. So,
what a great endorsement! Thank you.
Yeah, do check that out. I'm plugging everybody right now. So, Wissam.
And all I do I keep shitting on everything Ali says, and then he comes back and he's so nice to me. Thank you, Ali.
I'm very secure. I'm a very secure person. I compliment people too much? I do compliment people too much. Right?
No, I like it. Don't stop. Just keep doing
it. Well, for some reason, everybody says that.
No, your relationship on this podcast is exemplary, you guys. You exemplify rationalism.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
If this was on an Arabic show, you would be fighting in fists in the first 5 minutes.
Speaking of that, I have to plug one last thing. All right, and I don't know if Vidu Vids is listening, but Wissam, I don't know if you've seen this, but Vidu Vids and Armin Navabi did a Shia versus Sunni thing, where they're sitting on a couch and debating whether Shiaism is better or Sunniism is better. And this is an ex-Shia and an ex-Sunni talking about which one was better, and it was the funniest fucking thing I have seen in the longest time, because they're both of them have left it.
Yeah.
Right? And then Armin is there cursing Aisha, and then, he was like, what? She's the mother of all believers. What are you doing? And you just know that neither of them is serious about it, because it's just the best. Vidu, I heard you came up with that idea. I am actually jealous that I didn't come up with that. Or I wasn't part of it, whatever it is, but it was.
So it's called. What is it called again? The video ex-Shia versus ex-Sunni, I think, right?
Ex-Shia versus ex-Sunni.
Just search for that on YouTube. You should be able to find that. Yeah.
I don't want to be creating an ex-unity again.
It'll be good. I like it. I like where this thing's going. I honestly like in Amsterdam, all of the people I met. I mean, there's the new generation of people doing this, and they're all so interesting, and there's different contexts and different flavors to it.
I like how we are all these different groups like XMNA, Muslimish, Secular Jihadists, Council of Ex-Muslim of Great Britain, Ex-Muslim of Norway, Ex-Muslim of Sweden. Atheist Republic. I like the fact that we're all working together, and the challenge is like we are going to have like drama and internal fighting and stuff like that, and we had that a lot, but still it didn't stop us from doing cross group collaboration work, right? Because drama will happen. Every movement as it grows is going to have internal fighting and drama and stuff like that. But if we could meet that, if we could just, the ones that are leading all these groups, if we could like just ignore that and continue working with each other, I think I'm seeing more and more of that. Like I'm seeing instead of like trying to compete with each other, I'm seeing that they see a lot of value in working with each other, and I think that's the recipe for the success of this movement.
Yeah, I think all of us have sort of done that and kind of waded through.
I'm seeing it. It's just beautiful. I love when we do collaborative work with different organizations. That just warms my heart. I don't know how to explain it, but it's fantastic. Yeah.
No, it is. I love where it is right now. I mean, we had Sarah on the Bill Maher show. Like,
yes,
it's just the whole thing is it's very mainstream. Just the idea. We had Hawza. This is a Pakistani kind of reference, so you guys won't get it. But one of the biggest actors and celebrities in Pakistan, Hawza the Abbasi, who's a personal friend of Imran Khan, the Prime Minister, has done 2 episodes on Haris Sultan's podcast. And I don't even think the content is relevant. It's just the idea that they know that there is an opposition. There's a 1-to-1 opposition now. Is just massive. The optics of this is incredible.
And honestly, Sarah, again, I have to post about this at some point. I just got from trip, but the Sarah showing up on Bill Maher, that's a huge step forward for all of us. For all of us, they mentioned. I mean, even if she just didn't say a single word, right? Even
she did a good job. She did a really.
She did a very good job. Yeah,
she did, but. Even if she didn't have to, like she did them, obviously Sarah Hader, she will always do a great job. But just the introduction alone was a huge leap forward for all of us. Just saying the word ex-Muslim on such a platform that when it comes to normalizing our existence, I think that was a major achievement. So thank you for Sarah for going there.
Yeah. So anyway, Muslimish is. I just went to their last meetup here in Toronto.
Oh yeah.
Sohail, every single time. Sohail runs the chapter for Muslimish and XMNA here in Toronto. So he is every time I go there.
I'm so jealous that you're so close to all this activity. By the way,
I met a new person from Turkey who just arrived 3 days ago. Muslimish.
Can you guys?
I met another guy from Kuwait who just came 6 weeks ago. Then I met this guy who the last time I met him was 2001. I went to his house to record some music stuff, and then he showed up. He's like, we met in 2001. And I vaguely remembered. I'm like, holy shit, like this is, and we're all meeting at this one place. It's just every time I go there.
Can you guys open more Muslimist chapters around North America?
Yes, they're all on the website. Toronto, you want me to mention them now?
Yes.
Detroit, Toronto, New York, Boston, Atlanta, San Francisco, LA, Houston. Where else? How many did I mention? Chicago. We've wanted to start outside, but we can't really help people if they get in trouble. So that's why we refrained from going outside North America. I want to say just one thing. If people, I know that you have a large crowd listening to this beautiful and successful podcast. That every single effort, every single support really counts. In 2009, when I was going through transformation and I was looking for something about science, I found a little meeting in the basement of a little library in one of the cities close by. And I went there, and there was a scholar talking about, they had a university professor as a guest speaker talking about scientific method. And there was about 6 people in the audience, all of them like above the age of 60, except me and 2 other friends who are in the process of our existential meltdown and questioning, and we were sitting down and writing and taking notes, and that was like an important lecture for us. For them, it was just another boring, unsuccessful meeting. That's how they perceived it. And then that was the last meeting of that chapter, and we were lucky to catch the last meeting of that chapter, which was very important to us. I did one meetup for Muslimish in one of the theaters, just a social outing, film. And, we're a bunch of friends, so we went there. And I told them I'm going to make it a meetup, just in case someone likes to join us. So one girl joined us who's been living for 9 years in Dearborn, but did not know that there's such people live here. She thought everyone here is religious. So she was living for 9 years without true friends, until she found this meetup and she showed up, and now she's the vice president of the Detroit chapter, and she's gonna be the MC of the first section in the conference. So these small things, just a meetup or just an opportunity here and there, please never look down at it. If you're listening to this episode, help the movement in any way possible. Thank you.
Yes, please do. Link in the description again.
Good. There you go. Everybody, thank you very much. Thank you for listening again. And thank you, Wissam. Thank you, Armin. Thank you, me. Thank you. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Ali.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yes,
all right. We can stay. Wissam, you can stay.
We don't thank Ali enough. Yeah, thank you, Ali.
What?
All right, bye.
Secular Jihadists is an increasingly influential podcast with much of its growing audience in Muslim-majority countries, advocating for atheists, secularists, and Enlightenment thinkers. We want to reach out to more people. If we reach 500 patrons, we will be able to translate our shows into Arabic, Urdu, Persian, Bengali, Malay, Turkish, and other languages in these countries. Help us get there at patreon.com/SJME.